Welcome, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you that have others that might want to see this webinar, we are going to record it today, so you can pass it on to others that need to look at it later. So today we're going to talk about ICE 4.9 and what the enhancements are coming out in this new release. As many of you are aware, we come out with a new version of ICE each summer, and those enhancements that are included in each version are recommendations by our users. So we appreciate you recommending enhancements to the system to further benefit everyone. So we're just going to take some time today to share exciting enhancements that will be in this next release, and we can just jump right in. I will cover the new enhancements in this version, resolved issues since the last release, which was 4.7, and our next steps involved in upgrading your ICE system. At the end, we'll just take some questions on our enhancements or anything else you have ICE related. All right, so let's look at our first enhancement. For our new member search page, we've added a content block to give your new members instructions. For those of you that are using the ICE claim account process for your new members, this is the page that can be used for new members to claim their account if they don't have the unique URL that was sent to them via an email. They will select their chapter from the drop-down list and enter their last name and their invite code, which is unique to them. The invite code should be accessible on a report such as unclaimed new members on your ICE site, where a chapter officer could share that invite code with that specific new member. The invite code allows them to review the information that's already been entered for them by the officer when they added them as a new member in ICE. The content block can be used to provide instructions. So to find this page, because it's not a selection in the ICE admin portal, we pull up a Chrome site. If you go to your base ICE URL and then at the end add /public/newmembersearch.aspx, you'll get to this page if you're using the ICE claim account process. And you can see here we saw the same as we saw in the screenshot on the slide, but I've added some text at the top for instructions for that new member. So if they get to this page and they don't have that invite code, we instruct them to go back to their chapter officer to retrieve that for them from their ICE system. Okay, enhancement number 2. You now have the ability to delete pending new member transactions within ICE admin. Before this, you had to log in as a user that started the add new member process in order to delete the new member transaction. In most cases, these are the officer started adding the new member and maybe stopped, and the new member was added by another officer. So they're already in the system, so this pending transaction is in most cases a duplicate. So let's take a look at what that can do. We log into my demo site. I'm going to go to Workflow, Task, and Manage Task Queue. And this is where I'll see any pending new member transactions. Now normally you should be looking at this page to see if any recent transactions are showing, so that maybe you can follow up with that chapter to say, if this new member has not already been added, please complete the process. You can see who has added the user. You can see their IMIS ID here as well as their full name. But if I know that these are duplicate transactions, the process does not need to be completed, these are just pending transactions that can be deleted, I now have a delete button over to the far right where I can click delete. It's going to ask me, are you sure? And I say okay. and the transaction is deleted and it will no longer appear on this list. All right, enhancement number 3. We've added the ability to identify a content block for a specific security permission or role. This could be useful when you want to show content that is only applicable to certain users. You would create a security permission and assign the permission to the content block. Only users with that security permission will be able to see the content block. So let's take a look. In this example, I've created a security permission called View HC Content right here at the bottom. I've given this security permission to my Housing Corps members for a chapter group. I then want to go identify the content block, and in this case, I'm going to use a content block that's on my landing page in ICE. In that case, it's my Task Center node. Some of you may call this dashboard. I can go to my Content Blocks tab. And you can see here I've added a House Corporation content block to the landing page. So I'm going to click on Edit. You can see I've given it a code, a title, and given it some text. But you can see here at the bottom, I have a drop-down box that has the option for security roles. So these are all the security permissions that you've created. And you can select one or multiple to identify whoever has this security role will be able to see this content block. If they don't have the security role, they will not be able to see it. So let me give you some examples. In this screenshot, I'm logged in as a chapter secretary. And because I'm a chapter secretary and I'm not part of that Housing Corps security group and I do not have the View HC Content permission, I do not see the content block on the dashboard that I added under the sitemap. Now if I'm logged in as a House Corporation treasurer, I can see this content block because I am fitting in that security group and I have that View HC Content permission, and therefore I can see the content block. So for some of you that are using ICE for multiple audiences, this may be very useful to make sure the audience is only seeing what's applicable to them. You can put in unique messages and unique content to make it more specific to them. All right, Enhancement 4. You can now disable the Apply to All option for additional information fields in Workflow Actions. So let me show you what this means. Let me log in to my other site. In this case, I'm going to go to Manage Members Transaction, and I have modified my initiate transaction. So I'm going to pick a couple users. And normally Apply to All is a great resource for users to be able to enter information and apply it to all the members that they've selected with the same type of action. So in this case, I chose to remove the Apply to All option for birth date, because in most cases, your entire new member class does not all have the same birth date unless they're multiples. So we don't want to influence them to use the Apply to All option for this particular field. Enhancement number 5, when submitting forms, you will now see the user's full name rather than IMIS ID on the receipt step. This can be helpful for referencing who submitted the form if they normally retain the receipt page for their records. So you can see in this case it says submitted by with their full name. Previously it would just show IMIS ID, which is not really useful to the user. Enhancement 6. Within Manage Approvals, request date now reflects the date the request was submitted. For example, when the form or workflow transaction was processed, that date will appear here. Previously, this was displaying the effective date of the transaction, which could be far in the past and not reflective of when the request was made. Enhancement 7. This is more of a somewhat correction to functionality, but if you're in Manage Profiles within ICE Admin, you can now use the content blocks on the Content Blocks tab. We only activated the top and bottom content blocks, as the left and right don't provide an effective use and will ultimately be removed from the ICE Admin at a later time. So let's take a look at that. In this case, I updated my member profile, so I'm going to go pick a member to edit their profile. And when I get to the profile page, I can see some text at the very top. This is the top content block. And if I scroll down, I can see some text at the bottom. This is the bottom content block. As you know, you can add content blocks such as like fields within these areas, but usually those are specific to maybe the field or section that it is above or below. So these content blocks are used for more generalized instructions or information purposes regarding the profile. Okay. Enhancement 8. Within ICE Forms, you can now create a custom validation table for a field in your form. As you know, you can certainly use a general lookup validation table from IMIS for fields used in ICE Forms. But sometimes you might have a need for a drop-down list that may be quite long or constantly changing. Good examples might include an active chapter list, an active member list for that chapter that you've selected, and more. So let's take a look at how that works. In ICE Admin, excuse me, I can go to Forms, Settings, and Lookup Configuration. I created a lookup table that is showing me a list of active chapters. So I have to determine the member type and status. This query I tested within SQL to make sure it's providing me the information that I need. I at least need to provide at least one value to appear in the drop-down list, but you can also provide 2 columns for same as what you see in a validation table for code and description to show to the member, and it's always going to show description. I can also use parameter fields such as @contact-ID or @user-ID to make it more specific to the chapter that I'm on or the user that I'm selecting. So you can get very, very complicated in producing the data. So in this case, I just produced a simple list of active chapters that'll be the same for every chapter that they're on. And I've added it to a form. I'm going to go in and select my form. And in this case, I have added a field. It doesn't have a validation table already, and I just selected my new lookup table to be identified for this field. And you can see I now have a drop-down list that's producing all those chapters, and I didn't have to enter all those hundreds of chapters into a gen lookup table in IMIS. This is dynamically produced with that SQL code. All right, Enhancement 9. For those of you using the new member import feature where they can use a CSV file to import their new member class, there are now content block options for each of the sections to help guide your user on what to do in each section. So let's look. If I go to Add New Members. If I have my new member import feature configured, I have this Add Person to File button available. And when I open this, you can see I have some content right at the top. It's a little small, but this will be generic information about what they're about to do with importing new members. And then I can click into each section, and I have more text that can appear to give them more further instructions. A good example is the validation section to further explain what they need to do if they have any formatting issues that will appear in red. So you may add some HTML here to identify what they need to be able to do or give them suggestions for formatting. All right, Enhancement 10. For fields where you have set a date validation parameter, users will now see a more detailed message as to why the date they entered is invalid. It will show the approved date range according to the parameter that you have entered within ICE admin. These parameter settings are within the additional information fields that you set up when you set up the workflow action. So in this screenshot here, it's an initiate action, and I put a parameter on bid date, and you can see I put in specifically number of days before and number of days after, and it's dynamically figuring out, according to today's date, what is that date range that's acceptable. Enhancement 11. When a user selects Save and Exit in an ICE form, it will now show a status of last saved by and show the user's full name as normal. Previously, the status when they would select just Save and Exit rather than going through all the steps and signing off, it would actually show Submitted by, which is not reflective of what actually occurred. So let's see that in action. So in this case, I'm going to go back to a form. And I'm just going to pick a new one. So I'm going to fill in a couple of information. And I'm going to click Save and Exit. And this is where you're able to put in any notes to remind yourself what you need to complete. It's going to exit me from that form, but if I go back in to that form again, you can see I have several that I've done today, but all of them say last saved by manager. So if I went through the entire process and submitted the form, it would then say submitted by. So let's update one. So again, I go back into the form. And I have an approval step on this, so you can see some of these are saying pending for approval, but it would normally say submitted by manager, since I'm logged in as manager. Okay. Enhancement number 12. You can now sort by any column heading in Manage Approvals. This will be useful when the transaction list is long and you need to sort by name, type of action, or date requested. So let's take a look. I go to Manage Approvals. Go to Step 2. I select my chapter and select a section. And here's where I can click on the column heading such as Requested Action. It's going to group by action type. This will be useful if you have several staff members that are approving different types of actions. They could sort to find a particular action that they approve only, as well as sorting by requested date and member name, which is sorting by last name. All right, moving right along, Enhancement 13. Just like you're able to clone a form, you can now clone a workflow action. For actions that are similar, use this clone feature to copy all of the settings from the workflow action and make minor revisions as needed. We mostly recommend this process for membership actions where the most setup is required, because for leadership actions, a lot of the information and activity mapping settings are already pre-populated once you select leadership as the category type when setting up your workflow action. So for those that are in a need for additional membership actions that might be similar in nature, the clone will be very helpful to copy all the qualifiers, activity mappings, billing settings, all those criteria that you've added to that workflow code. Enhancement 14. When setting up server mode reporting, where reports are using your report server to display rather than uploading them to ICE, you must set up the connection to your report server. For those that are just setting this up or making changes to your report server, you can now test your connection after updating or adding your settings. Previously, you would have to update the sitemap and test the report to confirm the connection. So otherwise, now you can just click the test connection button. It will tell you success or failure. Connection failures are normally due to incorrect login information. As a reminder, the login information entered here should be a network user that has access to that server, not an IMIS user, so not the SA login. Enhancement 15. We've added a save option within Forms that will allow the user to save their work as they go without exiting. It's a floating save button that appears on the right side. For those of you with really long forms, this may be very useful as the user can save as they go and not lose anything. It will be retained in IMIS if they're logged out due to inactivity. So let's take a look, and you may have seen a peek of it when I was in a form earlier. I'm going to select the new form so I can enter information here. And you can see my Save button on the far right. You can see when I scroll, it scrolls with me. So again, on those long forms, this will be very easily accessible. As well as when they click Save, it will not refresh the page and go all the way back to the top. It will stay in the same section where they click Save. Enhancement 16. You can now give your chapters the ability to add a member into a duplicate position and also control what those positions, which positions can be duplicated and how many times. So let's take a look. In ICE Admin, you will go to your sitemap node where you have the Manage Committees action. In this case, I have it under Leadership, Actions, Change Collegiate Leaders. Once I'm on the sitemap node, I'll click on the Parameters tab at the far right. And this will show me the positions that I have available on this page. This is reflective of what is in your committee position gen lookup table that's in IMIS. So, those positions that you have identified are managed in ICE. To identify a position that can be duplicated, you'll pick Edit. You'll enter the number for the number of times the position can be duplicated. In this case, I've set my board member position to allow for 3 duplications. So that means I can have up to 4 board members. Once I make those selections, I will go back to ICE and go to my sitemap where that was an option. I'll go to step 2 where I can select the positions that I want to change. And you can see I have a add duplicate position button now that appears just for board member. If I click on that button, a new board member position will appear, obviously with no one assigned to the position yet. And you can see I still have that add duplicate position button available to me, so I can click it again. And I can click it one more time because I allowed 3 duplications. After I've met my limit, that add duplicate position button will disappear. I still have the remove duplicate position button, but notice that it is only appearing for those positions that are not already filled. I would not be able to delete Taylor's position here, for example. So it's only going to remove duplicate position if that position is not filled. But I would then pick the positions that I want to go in and set and continue on my normal process of identifying those members and adding them to the positions. Enhancement 17. When creating security groups, we have added a validate button to the far right so you can confirm that your query is producing the right members. According to, you test these things in SQL, and sometimes when you put them in ICE, it doesn't display exactly the same. So this is a great way to confirm that your SQL code that you have entered is correct. So let's check it out. So in ICE admin, I would go to my security groups list. And let's validate my housing core group. In this case, I can click on my validate button. I have a group ID option with all my chapters listed, and that is because since everyone's access is chapter specific, especially if you've identified it that way, that they have access to certain chapters only, you'll pick the chapter that you want to verify. So in this case, I'm going to pick Alpha. And once I hit submit, it's going to show me the members that fall under this security group. And these happen to be the active House Corporation members that are listed on my committee. So I can verify that my security group is correct. I can also change my demographic pointers here. So if I wanted to see different fields after I hit submit, I could use any field that is in my demographic definitions list. All right, Enhancement 18. We've added the ability to purge old notification errors. For those of you using ICE email notifications, there are times when those notifications fail and will appear in this error log. If you have been using ICE email notifications for a long time, this error log might be quite long and take a while to produce and make your ICE admin site slow. You can now purge these old notifications so that you can focus on the most recent errors to address accordingly to make sure those notifications process completely. We have several other enhancements included in this version that are a little harder to show you in real life, but just wanted you to know that there's been an enhancement to the workflow transaction to prevent stalled transactions, as well as updates to the Manage Members control page to handle more transactions at once for those of you with those very large chapters or groups of transactions. As you can see, we've added a lot in this version of ICE. We hope you're as excited as we are. We also want to point out that over the past year, we have included over 40 fixes and small enhancements to ICE 4.7 that you're on currently. You can see these documented in the ICE 4.7 release guide that you receive each time an ICE patch is applied. If you don't have a current copy, please let us know. We can send it to you. Our next step is to load ICE 4.9 to your test ICE systems for you to test these new enhancements that I've shown you today, as well as your current functionality to make sure everything works as expected. For many of you, this upgrade has already been scheduled and will be completed in the next few weeks. If you have any questions or concerns about the schedule, please contact your account manager. We'll also work with you to tentatively schedule your live upgrade with your approval. Our goal is to have everyone in ICE 4.9 before the beginning of the academic year, so not to interfere with beginning year actions. It is very important that your testing be completed timely in order for this to occur. You will be sent a test guide to walk you through how to test the enhancements that I just reviewed. And also don't forget that you have access to the ICE user guide within the ICE admin portal under the help menu item. So in case you have any questions about functionality that is already in the system. Okay, I think I've talked enough. I would love to hear from you. Let's open up the floor for questions. If you could type in your question into the question box in the webinar, I will read them out and answer your question as best I can. If there are any items that you're really excited about, I'd love to hear from you. If there's specific ones that you're excited about and ready to test immediately, please put those in the chat window as well. Okay, we've got one question. Can we delegate the add new member deletion to another staff member besides manager? Yes. There are different security groups within the ICE admin that you can identify who has access to what. I'll need to confirm. You can actually give certain security permissions, but there's already default ones for content blocks, demographics, things like that. I think it would be under Manage ICE Settings, but I'll double confirm that for you, Matt, and I'll share it with the group. Had a comment about very excited about the duplicate positions, and our consultants may cry at the ability to save their reports without having to exit. Love it. I was hoping that a lot of people would be excited about that. Any other questions or comments? Very cool enhancements. Our officers have recently asked for the save feature, so I'm super excited it has been added as a feature. Thank you. Give one more minute for any other comments. Well, we thank you again for spending some time with us today. We hope you are excited to get these loaded to your test system to play around and see what you'll be able to use and give your officers and chapters use for this new academic year. We thank you again. I hope you have a great rest of your day and week. Thank you.